Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Tuesday, June 21st, 2022. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, well, let me tell you a little bit about my co-host. You know what, folks? Today is National Peaches and Cream Day. And my friend, well, she's as sweet as a Georgia peach. And if you disagree with that, she'll cream ya. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
Oh, David, I'm great. I've never been described as peaches and cream before. How's it going?
Does anyone actually, I mean, I love cream in my coffee, but I got to tell you, as long as I've been on this planet, I don't think I've ever had a peach with some cream poured on it. I mean, I know it's a thing, but is it a thing for you? I mean, I've never had this experience. Maybe we should try it out today because it is National Peaches and Cream Day.
I don't eat fruit, so I don't know, and it just seems like a waste of good coffee cream. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Not to be confused with Peaches and Herb, because I know you quote that song title, Reunited, and it feels so good.
And it does.
And the second you quoted that in the morning meeting, you already regretted it.
I did.
As well,
I was like, how do I put that right back in my mouth?
So in any event, Sheila, I think this is the point in the show in which you explain the ostensible policy reason of what we're trying to do here.
Oh, my Lord. It's World Productivity Day today. Ugliest Dog Day. Morgan, there's a chance. There's a chance. It's a special day for my snaggletooth dog. National Vanilla Milkshake Day. National Take Your Cat to Work Day. Mine just interrupted an interview with Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science, so also accurate. National Hike with a Geek Day. Is this like Take a Liberal to the Gun Range Day? There's a lot. Wow. David, I've got to send you this.
Where are you finding them? I had, National Hike with a Geek Day, but would a geek be into hiking? I mean, isn't that what, in a geek, I assume, Sheila, stays indoors, like playing video games and stuff like that, right?
I think that's to get them out of the house. So, like, they created a day around it. It's also, oh, Lord, Justin Trudeau. Good news. It's National Selfie Day.
Oh.
It's also National Day of the Gong. So, I don't know. R.I.P. everybody in the office.
I mean, is there a gong manufacturing association that says, you know what, we got to claim one of these days? I mean, a gong? Who uses gongs anymore? The last gong I saw was
Monks?
In the 70s, the Gong Show. And that was a great show, so ahead of its time. Chuck Barris, the dearly departed, brilliant TV producer. Oh, how I loved the Gong Show. It pretty much, predicted the future.
Yeah.
Except back then you could hit a gong and they're whisked off the stage. And now, well, they get grief
YouTube
counsel.
just canceled. YouTube just turns your channel off. There's a gong. You just wake up and you're like, oh, I thought I had a Twitter account, but Twitter has other plans for me. That's the modern gong.
You know what? True story. When the Gong Show movie came out, which was absolutely horrid, and it stuck around in Toronto cinemas for only 6 days, and I went to see it at the dearly departed Highland Cinema, which was over 1,000 seats.
You did.
There were 5 people in the cinema. It only had one genuine laugh. But the funny thing, that we had a censor board back then, and it was going through all kinds of controversy.
We still have that now. We just don't call it that.
Yeah, it's something weird, but Ontario was one of the worst in the world. And the mass-produced Gong Show movie poster, the tagline, Sheila, was the only movie that was gonged by the censors, right? And the Ontario Censorship Board, because they were, I don't know, paranoid nuts, thought this was an insult directed at them, but it was for all the posters around the world. So the theaters in Ontario had to censor the tagline. They put white hockey tape over. There you go. The gong show that was gonged by the censor. That tagline did not appear in Ontario because by ruling of the censors.
It's so perfect, isn't it? It's like a Fibonacci sequence of just perfect government ineptitude. We should tell everybody what we're doing right now before we get too far into the show. It's the Rebel News daily live stream, where you'll find out exactly what day it is and what lobby group has lobbied what interest group to create a special day for them. It's also National Milkshake Day, in case you're wondering. But this is where we normally talk about the news of the day, and I promise we'll get to it. We are streaming on YouTube, but there might come a time during the show where we have to cut the YouTube feed because YouTube is the new censorship panel. Used to just the government used to do it. Now big tech does it. So if we get to a point where we might have to say something that might run afoul of YouTube's acceptable speech laws, their blasphemy laws, we'll cut the feed so that we don't lose the channel. And then we will continue streaming on Getter and Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. And the beauty of Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U is that they allow you to send us paid chats. So paid chats is your chance to take control of the show and support the work that we do. So if you send us a paid chat, I will read it on air, and David and me will do our best to address whatever your question, query, or comment is. But it's your way to have your say, but support us at the same time.
Yeah, and lots to get to. One of them being, well, it looks like Marco Mendicino is now playing the victim card along with Jagmeet Singh, who's still whining about nasty words thrown his way in Peterborough, if you can imagine. But, you know,
by white supremacists in turbans.
Yeah. Oh, boy, they really fooled him that day. You know, what I'm getting at, Sheila, the headline says, MPs getting panic buttons after minister reveals he received death threats. Now, here's the thing. Before we get into this, and it's ludicrous enough, just the thought of this, but there was an MP on our radio panel roundtable today whose name I cannot mention by court order. But she said this is nothing new. This has been a fact for a long while. Maybe not all MPs, but MPs that think they're under any kind of special threat. I think it's a case assessment basis. But the idea of panic buttons being in the House of Commons is not new. So I'm confused, Sheila. Have you ever heard about this before? Is she right about this or not?
I have no idea about the panic buttons. I wouldn't be shocked to find out that they have this extra level of security, in particular after the shooting that took place at the House of Commons. But as you were talking there, I was just sending a note to our researcher to say, let's ATIP these death threats, because when I ATIP'd Catherine McKenna's death threats, there were no death threats. There were no police reports. There were just tweets where people were making fun of her for doing stupid stuff. But there were no death threats. It's just sort of rough language sometimes, but welcome to the internet. So I'm just going to see what I can find out about these so-called death threats Mendicino is getting. Or is he a lying liar who lies? Well, misinformation Mendicino strikes again.
And, you know, Sheila, you nailed it, I think. I don't think these are actual physical threats in the House. I mean, there's so much security just to get into the building, especially now. It would be, you know, incredible if anyone could breach that. I think we're talking about, you know, enriched debate in the House. And I have an example, not in the House of Commons, but where I live in Richmond Hill. About 10 years ago, and this made the newspapers, there was a counselor. Her name, she's no longer sitting there. Her name is Brenda Hogg. I guess we all have our crosses to bear, don't we?
Yikes.
And the debate in council got really inflamed. And and it wasn't even words direct, it was just the temperament of the debate, the loudness. She pushed the panic button, and York Regional Police came, and it was a fiasco. So is this what we're talking about? Are we at the point, Sheila, where impolite questions and loud voices warrant panic buttons?
Yes, because these are the same people who say words are violence, right? So they're the ones who say that your peacefully expressed opinion, which disagrees with theirs, is akin to violence. And so imagine how they feel if you raise your voice or use a little bit of blue language, then basically you've murdered them. And so naturally they would have a panic button for that. This is just the shifting use of our language where, violence used to actually be like violence, contact.
So,
and threats used to actually mean threats and not just something that somebody said that made you feel uncomfortable.
So why don't we take this to the crazy, illogical conclusion, which would be another button in addition to the panic button. When you press the panic button and the MP is still ranting, you press this additional button, which controls a Wilson trap door, which opens up and the MP across the floor goes down a tube onto a mattress and is removed from the House of Commons.
This is where we're at. But Mendocino, he's just as basically he shot his credibility. When he ran for the Liberals and previous to that, but in particular with his handling of the convoy and his lies about the convoy, and his lies about law enforcement in the convoy. So color me, skeptical here. I'm sorry, but fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. He's just the liar who cried wolf just a few too many times, I think.
Oh, but Sheila, wait a second. This idea of law enforcement coming to the federal government asking to invoke the Emergencies Act, it was a misunderstanding, according to the deputy minister. What they were asking for was we need the tools that are included in the Emergencies Act. That's a lie too, by the way. No corroboration of that either. They're a bunch of lying liars. I mean, they are in line for the crown that Patrick Brown currently wears as the most lying politician in our great Dominion.
Yeah, and Mendocino, he's decided that he's going to be the point man on the gun grab, the latest gun grab. And I think we have a clip of him who says the recent shootings over the weekend, I don't even know where the shootings were. I'm going to guess Toronto. But he says the recent shootings in Toronto by illegal guns in the hands of unlicensed gangsters is evidence that I should no longer be able to go to the gun range with my handgun. Do we have that clip?
First, this past weekend, we saw another spate of shootings in a variety of communities across the country, which underlines just how urgent the matter is, which is why I'm calling on Conservatives to stop with the delay and the filibustering. That's not helping anybody. Let's have a debate on the merits of this bill, which, by the way, is gaining steam in terms of the support that it's receiving from Canadians since our launch. Why? Because I think Canadians understand that we have to do better by those who've been impacted by gun violence, and they also see a lot of common sense behind the measures of introducing a national handgun freeze around targeting organized criminals with higher sentences for illegal smuggling, and finally through the introduction of red flag laws tackling the concurrent trends of intimate partner violence and gun violence.
Unbelievable.
This guy's such a liar, and he couldn't look more douchey if he tried with that thing tossed over his shoulder. But what an absolute liar. Okay, so he says we're going to introduce red flag laws. We already have those. I literally just renewed my gun license yesterday. And every time you have to sign off and say, no, I haven't, tried to commit suicide. I haven't had any domestic violence issues. I haven't been subject or even involved in any domestic issues. I haven't been subject to a restraining order. All of those things you have to sign off, and then you have to give them your husband's phone number so they can call him. And not just your husband, any conjugal partners within the last 2 years, you have to tell the government. Am I frozen up while I'm talking about conjugal partners? Anyway.
Oh boy, there's a punchline hovering there over home plate, but I dare not say.
I know. But you have to, not just your husband, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend currently, anybody that you've been intimately involved with in the previous 2 years, the government has to call them, whether you like them or not, whether you left on good terms, and get their permission for you to have a firearm. And so for him to say, oh, we're going to enact red flag laws, we already have that. And you can at any time have your guns revoked. If your neighbor calls the cops and says, I think she's emotionally unstable over there, they'll come yank my gun license. That's what it's like in Canada. So for him to say that we don't have that, what an absolute liar.
Yeah.
Or maybe, like most liberals, he has no idea what the gun laws are in this country. But he doesn't have to. He just makes the gun laws. The rest of us have to know them, because if we don't, we go straight to jail.
And meanwhile, Sheila, the number of homicides that are committed by guns, I believe it's in the neighborhood of 83 to 86% are illegal handguns. Not the rifles taken from duck farmers in Saskatchewan that are obeying all the rules. And gee, why would that be? Why would criminals be using illegal Oh, that's right. They don't obey the law. That's what makes them criminals. So the idea of having tougher laws for the criminals, can you imagine the gangbangers going, oh, Marco Mendicino is bringing in this whole new raft of regulations. Well, it was fun while it lasted. I guess I'll have to turn in my gun or get rid of it. This is ludicrous. They're not fooling anyone, and they're only penalizing legal gun owners like you, Sheila Gunn Reid.
Well, it's even worse because, once again, he lied on another issue. He said we're tightening up the sentences for gun traffickers. Are you? Are you really? Because what he's doing with this new handgun ban is he's creating a class of criminals from the ether. You're taking law-abiding people who just want to sell their lawfully obtained private property to another person with the same licensing level who may or may not also have a handgun. But if they do that, you're a gun criminal. But simultaneously, and a lot of Canadians don't know this, because maybe even Mendicino doesn't know it, because again, he's either an idiot or a liar. I can't tell. It's kind of dealer's choice there, isn't it? But the Liberals right now in the House of Commons, they've tabled legislation to eliminate mandatory minimum penalties for a number of tobacco, firearms, and drug offenses. Sounds a lot like the things that gangs do, right? Yeah. So the bill would eliminate mandatory minimum penalties for 14 of the 67 offenses in the criminal code that currently carry them. 13 of those are for firearms offenses and 1 for tobacco. The bill would also eliminate mandatory minimum sentences for offenses under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. Again, this helps gangs who deal in drugs. Yep. Mandatory minimum sentences would remain in place for murder, high treason, impaired driving, sexual offenses, and a number of other firearms offenses. So these are the paper crimes. So they're keeping the mandatory minimum sentences in place for paper crimes, but dropping them on things that gangs would do. So making it a lot easier to be a recidivist gun criminal than it is to be just a regular law-abiding Canadian firearms owner. And they're doing this in the name of fighting institutional racism, which I can't even, I know you're laughing, but it makes me furious because this is the bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah.
Are we just assuming that, minority people are going to join gangs and they can't help themselves but do gun crimes? Is that the Liberals' pretense here? Sounds like it.
It's all about race, isn't it? By the way,
outrageous.
In all those items you listed, Sheila, what is the current definition these days of high treason? I'm very confused.
I don't know.
What do you have to do to qualify to be a high treasonist?
Disagree with the government, have a bouncy castle and a street party in Ottawa.
There you go.
And then high treason for you. So I did a video on this a little while ago because I didn't think people really realized. So the crimes where the minimum sentences are being repealed, and if you go through these individually, these are all gang related crimes. So while gangs are shooting up the cities, the Liberals are actually making it easier to be a gang that shoots up a city and making it harder to be a sports shooter like me. Possession of a prohibited or restricted firearm with ammunition. So if you're not licensed to have it, or if you have a taser and you're not supposed to have it, and you have ammunition, you're not getting the mandatory sentence.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Stolen guns. Possession of a weapon obtained by the commission of an offense. So a stolen gun, you're not getting the mandatory anymore. Weapons trafficking, excluding firearms and ammunition. So tasers is fine. Possession for the purpose of weapons trafficking, though. So you can't commit the trafficking, but you can obtain the weapons and have them, and then importing or exporting, knowing it is unauthorized. So this is trafficking in it by another way. Discharging a firearm with intent, so shooting at someone, you will not get the mandatory sentence anymore. Shooting at someone, like shooting up a playground, you're not going to get the mandatory sentence anymore. Discharging a firearm recklessly, so without intent, that's also not the mandatory sentence anymore. Robbery with a firearm, not a mandatory sentence anymore. And extortion with a firearm, not a mandatory sentence anymore. The only people who can extort you with a firearm is the government into getting a vaccine.
Yeah, good point. So what is the ostensible policy reason for these not being mandatory minimum sentences anymore, Sheila? Is it this garbage that would be cruel and unusual punishment? Or are we playing the race card here as well?
This is from the government's press release when they announced the changes. The government recognizes that there is systemic racism in Canada's criminal justice system. We have heard Canadians, the courts, and criminal justice experts, and seen the evidence of the disproportionate representation of Indigenous people, as well as Black Canadians and members of marginalized communities, both as offenders and victims. So this is why they're doing this. This is the bigotry of low expectations. So they're doing this for recidivist gun criminals, and I don't care what color you are. If you are extorting someone with a firearm, it should be harder for you to do it and not easier. But me, I will be a gun criminal if I try to transfer my firearm to another licensed firearms owner.
But Sheila, look at the inherent nonsense of that very sentence in the government's own words. It's not just Black and Indigenous offenders, but victims too. And what I'm getting at is that there are Black victims and Indigenous victims. Who goes to bat for them? This doesn't help them. This makes things worse, for Black and Indigenous crime victims.
This puts offenders back in low-income communities.
Exactly.
That doesn't make their community safer. It makes it worse for them. But that's okay because the Liberals say, hurting their arms, patting themselves on the back like that, because they say, look at us. We're fighting systemic racism by making Black communities less safe, by making reserves less safe.
And I believe we do have a video of Chrystia Freeland weighing in on this. Why don't we get to her pithy quotes?
Our government has done more than any previous Canadian government to get unnecessary guns off our streets. We have banned military-style assault weapons. No one should have those. I grew up on a farm. A rancher, a hunter, does not need a military-style assault weapon. And then recently, we have gone further, and we have put a freeze on the sale of handguns. And likewise, I have to say, you do not need a handgun to go hunting deer. And if there are coyotes who are harassing your cattle, you're not going to go after them with a handgun. So these are necessary measures. They are not fully in place yet. We need to get that legislation passed. And by themselves, they're not going to end everything. You can have laws that ban something and people will still break those laws. That is true. But do we as a country have to end, what I would describe as these fake fights over guns? Yes, we do. I have huge amount of respect for people who need a rifle to hunt a wolf or a coyote that is eating their calves. That happens. I've seen it. That's okay. That's necessary. But you do not need military-style assault weapons for that. You do not need handguns for that. And we really, as a country, just have to end this.
Well, Sheila, I just want to make...
Is someone in her office mad at her? Like, why did they let her go out there and say something so stupid?
Well, I was about to say, why does it always feel like when I'm looking at watching the video footage of a Freeland press conference, I feel like a member of the audience of Romper Room, which I think targeted the 3 to 5 demographic. I don't know if it's still on the air or not. If it isn't, we got the new host come the next election cycle. But the key thing here, well, there was many idiotic things she said, but this is key, Sheila. Military-style assault weapon. What she's saying is not a military assault weapon, military style. It's that one word, style. In other words, rifles that look ominous.
Cool.
They're black.
They look cool.
Yeah. They don't have that wooden stock. That's a friendly rifle. When it's all black, that's military style, like something Rambo would use. That doesn't make any sense. It's just a rifle that looks differently. I mean, you don't get killed by looks, but they seem to be, profiling guns by how they look as opposed to how they operate or function.
Feels like systemic racism. But she used some very interesting words there outside of military style, because they can't say military, because none of these are military
exactly
grade. They say military style, which means, I think, plastic stock. I think that's what it is. But some of them don't have plastic stocks. They're just awesome, and they're banning them.
Yeah.
But she doesn't use the word getting illegal guns off the street. She said getting
good catch. Yes.
unnecessary guns off the street. So what the government has deemed unnecessary for you as a private citizen to have, you should no longer have it. Then we go into the whole Marxist idea of you should only have that which the government determines that you need.
Yep.
And not that you want, not something that you've earned, not something that you've chosen to possess, but what the government has determined that you need. And this is a very Marxist way of looking at the world. Why do you need that?
Yeah.
Because I want it. Because
exactly.
because shut up, because it's none of your business. That's why.
Yeah.
It's the same people who say, Sheila, why does your husband need that pickup? Because mind your own business. You're not paying for it. That's why.
Yeah.
Why does Chrystia Freeland need to fly somewhere and then have her limo drive all the way from Ottawa to Montreal to pick her up? Why does she need to do that? But she says, we're banning military-style assault rifles because no ranchers and farmers need them. You know what gun is on that list? The Mini 14 ranch rifle. It's specifically designed for hunting varmints. Like, coyotes might be a little on the big side for it. But when she says, farmers don't need these military-style rifles, well, one of your so-called military-style rifles is literally called the ranch rifle. It's a very popular firearm in Canada. They banned it because it looks cool. It's got a cool black plastic stock. But then she says, no farmers need handguns to shoot a wolf. This woman is an absolute idiot. She went to the same gun course that Mendocino went to. You can't shoot a wolf. First of all, who's shooting a wolf with a handgun? But secondarily, you can't just go into the backyard and use your handgun.
Yeah.
I own all the land on this side of the road. I cannot go into the backyard and shoot a handgun. I have to call some overpaid bureaucrat at the RCMP, ask his permission to take my lawfully obtained firearm to the range to use it at the range, which is the only place that I can use it, and then I have to come straight home. So I have to call, ask permission, go to the range, and come straight home. I can't shoot coyotes in the backyard with a handgun. This woman is an absolute idiot. So when she says nobody needs to do that, nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. She's an idiot.
And Sheila, in terms of the case for guns, where you live, I understand it's very remote. If somebody was conducting a home invasion on your property and you phone 911, what do you think would be the time that law enforcement would need to get to your property?
Probably a half an hour.
Okay,
Probably
so in the meantime, what do you do if they take your guns away?
Well, and this is Justin Trudeau saying that I don't have a right to defend myself.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not asking Justin Trudeau's permission to protect my life. I'm not going to die to be a good liberal citizen. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just not. But Justin Trudeau thinks it's the obligation of every Canadian to engage in hand-to-hand combat with their attacker or assume the benevolence of their attacker, that their attacker is just there to take their TV and not their life or the lives of their children.
You know, it's amazing, Sheila. About 10 years ago, when I was with Sun News Network, I had a debate with Marianne Mead Ward, who has since become the mayor of Burlington, Ontario. I don't understand the kind of people living in my province anymore. But I posed that question to her. What if you were in a remote area of our country? There's a home invasion going on. You are a single woman with children. What do you do? And her answer, Sheila, was, you run away. I swear to God. And I tried to tell her, exactly. I said, if you are in your home, that's the finish line. There is no more area in which to run. And by the way, they can chase you and still do harm to you. But she could not bring herself to say that a firearm in that occasion, with people meaning to do you and your family harm, would be a good tool because you're too far away from law enforcement. Her idea is kind of like the first rule of Zombieland: cardio, run for the hills. Unbelievable. But that is the mindset out there, Sheila.
Yeah, and it's so shocking to see how married they are to this ideology. That for them, even in that scenario, they would sacrifice. At the end of the day, they'd be willing to sacrifice their own life and the lives of their children, the people you are supposed to protect, to the bitter end with your own life, that you would sacrifice them on the altar of your own anti-gun nonsense.
I have no words. It's unbelievable. We should get to some of the more pressing issues as well here, Sheila. Look at this. When I first read this, I thought they were talking about cars and charging stations, but Liberals propose another year of hybrid parliament. Has nothing to do
more
with
naked Liberals.
What was the name of that guy anyways?
I can't remember. His name is the last thing about him I remember.
and you know, here's the reality. COVID is effectively over. This is 2022, not 2020, when we didn't know so many things. And please, MPs, for those of you who say I'm from northern British Columbia or the territories, and do you know the hassle it is to fly into Ottawa and the amount of family time? Don't run for office. That's part of the deal. You have to show up in the House. I hate this. I really hate this idea of just, hey, man, I'll just mail it in from home with hopefully I'll remember to keep my junk covered up.
Tell that to everybody else. Yeah, it was William Amos, by the way. But tell that to everybody else. For example, in Alberta, sometimes your commute is 12 hours, 6 hours up to Fort Mac and 6 hours back down. You're gone for sometimes 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. If you're an expat Canadian working overseas, it's like 4 weeks in, 1 week off. My husband has gone sometimes 300 plus days of the year. That's the deal. That's his job. If you don't like it, you get a new job. And,
you know, this is yet another reason why I am liking Elon Musk ever so much, Sheila. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, he said, that's it. You come into the office. This pandemic is over. And if you don't like working in the office, then resign and pretend that you're working for some other company in your house. There you go. And he's right. I mean, he's the boss. Now, if you have an employer that is, flexible enough that you don't have to come in, that's one thing. But I think if you're a member of Parliament, you have to show up to that and to the House. And by the way, Sheila, look how many vacation days they get. Look how, whether it's the Christmas break or the summer break, they're gone for weeks, if not months. So that more than balances out for the number of days you have to actually show up, in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's a pretty good gig. All their expenses, their car expenses, benefits, comfortable salary. All we ask is that you go to work and wear some pants. And still, that's too much to ask of these Liberals.
What a low benchmark. And it happened twice to that guy, right?
Twice, which is not an accident. Once might be an accident, but twice, that's a fetish.
I think you're right.
Fetish.
Wow. I'm glad I wasn't on the receiving end of that visual. In any event, by the way, speaking of Elon Musk, why don't we talk about this, Sheila? Because I loved this New York Post opinion piece, which was entitled, "Cheers to Elon Musk for finally saying no to whiny, entitled millennial babies." And basically, this was about a bunch of SpaceX millennial employees going online to whine about Elon Musk being toxic and an embarrassment for his. I mean, Sheila, this is unbelievable. And and 5 of them, I believe, have reportedly been fired. And
well, I should hope so.
Oh,
Imagine if I went onto Twitter and whined about Ezra.
Well, exactly.
I would expect to be fired.
But the way the narrative, and the New York Post piece is brilliant. I urge our viewers to read it. The way it's being framed by the anti-Elon Musk camp is, oh, I thought this was Mr. Pro-free speech, and he gets a little criticism. No. What the First Amendment is protecting people from in the United States is that you go into the town square, you scream all kinds of things about anything, including the government, and the government doesn't have the right to arrest you for doing that. That's the First Amendment. If you work for a company, it's a different relationship than being in the town square and ranting and railing about something. Like you said, if you or I went onto social media and we started tearing a strip off of Ezra, are you kidding me? And
I would show myself out. I wouldn't want to stick around to be fired. I would be like, you know what? I know. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what they're thinking. They really are entitled if they think they can lip off about their boss in public and think they still have a job the next day.
I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson said it best. Know your role and shut your damn mouth. And that applies when you're working for a company. Elon Musk is the owner. Elon Musk is the boss. Know your role. That is, you're an employee. You're drawing a paycheck. And if you don't like the damn rules, and if you don't like your damn boss, then resign. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out of the company, and go work for another company where you have some kind of uber progressive boss that probably doesn't mind getting criticized.
Google.
Yeah.
Go to Google.
What? Would Google? But that's a very good point, Sheila. If you and I were Google employees and we started ranting and railing online about the Google CEO, do you think Google is going to tolerate that?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
No. I even think
Nobody
Google
would
wouldn't put up with that.
Sorry, what was that, Sheila?
I don't even think Google would put up with that.
Exactly.
I think Google would probably fire whoever did it and then bring in grief counselors for the rest of them. Something stupid like that.
Oh, gosh. And by the way, Sheila, we should point out, because you're wearing a lovely piece of new merchandise, Free the Beef, which reminds me of the dearly departed Clara Peller, the spokeswoman for Wendy's back in the 80s when things were normal, who always used to say, "Where's the beef?" What is Free the Beef, Sheila?
free the beef. Actually, we have a fun video actually on our YouTube channel right now of Adam encountering me just eating beef ribs in a parking lot. We had a little talk about Adam's beef campaign. The Liberals right now they're going to do it. They're going to label ground beef as bad for your health. And ground beef it remains the most affordable cut of beef. So this is also a direct attack. Oh, there I am, just randomly eating beef in a parking lot.
Beautiful.
So this is an attack on affordable cuts of beef that people from all socioeconomic backgrounds eat, but it really attacks the people or serves to scare the people who can't afford something else. 85% of Canadians every month eat ground beef in some form. Labeling this one form of beef hits 50% of the beef in the grocery store. And they're saying that it's high in saturated fats. Well, long before they were getting the science of COVID wrong, they were getting the science of nutrition wrong, particularly around saturated fats. That's for sure. But all that aside, this is an attack on the West. It's an attack on farmers. It shows just how disconnected the Liberals are from where their food actually comes from. And these are the same people who think there's absolutely nothing wrong with an avocado that is grown in a greenhouse somewhere in Mexico, then it has to be refrigerated all the way up here. They look at that and say, that's a whole food, health food, greenhouse gas emissions aside. And I don't care about greenhouse gas emissions, but they sure do. And they're labeling beef as though it's a cigarette. And so we have a campaign. I think it's Free the Beef. Is it Free the Beef? Yeah, Free the Beef.
It is Free the Beef. Yep.
Freethebeef.ca. You can go there and you can sign up our petition calling on the federal government to not label this delicious beef whole food. I think beef is a superfood. Ruminants are amazing animals. They take the things that we can't eat and then turn them into things that we need, like B12 and DHA that we can only get from animal sources. If you think that this is outrageous to label beef as dangerous, as though it's a cigarette, and that's another point here too. A lot of our beef goes for export. So this label will be on Canadian beef in an American grocery store beside beef produced in America that doesn't have the label, leading consumers to think that Canadian beef is somehow unhealthy. So if you disagree with that, if you support Canadian farmers, if you don't even have to think that beef is a superfood like I do. But if you think that labeling well-produced, nutritious Canadian beef like it is something bad for your health, if you disagree with the Liberals doing that, go sign that petition at freethebeef.ca.
And Sheila, this is the question that immediately arose when I saw this report. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but is there any other beef producing / beef exporting nation on planet Earth that are putting these labels on its product?
No. And the reason they're doing this is because you're not allowed to label a whole food. Like you can't label a banana and say, this is high in sugars, which could lead to diabetes. You can't label a banana like that. But because the beef is ground, it's technically processed. And so they get to label this as they can stick warning labels on processed foods. Now, they're not doing it with other processed foods, are they? They're not doing it to the Oreos. They're just doing it to ground meat, which is basically just, nothing substantial has been done to change the product. It's just sort of changed its form. It's like just a different cut. But one of the points I made in my video with Adam was literally right across the parking lot from where I was eating that beef rib was a McDonald's. And don't get me wrong, I like McDonald's because one of their slogans for their hamburgers is not without Canadian farmers. Yeah. And I like that. But they will not get a warning label slapped on their food or their beef. It's just in the grocery store where the ground beef really is in its purest form.
So, Sheila, this is the big question. What is the unspoken strategy here by this Liberal government going ahead with this? I mean, is this just virtue signaling? Look what we're doing to warn you about your health. Is that all it is? And yet the potential harm to the beef industry could be of a magnitude that is unacceptable. I mean, again, what is driving this?
I think there's a more macro view of this. I think Canada is the Great Reset nation. And so when they say get off, carbon, like when they say like you shouldn't be on oil and gas, and they say, we're imposing carbon taxes to get everybody off oil and gas, they really don't care about the jobs that are lost. They don't care about the cost to the consumer of those things. They don't care because their agenda is to get everybody off oil and gas and sort of control the world that way and your behaviors that way. When certain behaviors become too expensive and you don't do them, then you've just been controlled by people who didn't want you to do those things. They don't want you to travel and see the world and experience things and drive your car, which is really one of the great freedom assets of the last 100 years, was the vehicle becoming a consumer product. But these are also people who want you to eat the bugs. They want you to go vegetarian in the name of the planet. And again, eat however you want. Do not take your dietary advice from me. But let me just tell you that there are two things that you can get from meat that you can't get from anywhere else. DHA, you can eat algae and get DHA, but not at all in the volumes that you get it from eating animals. And I'd rather just eat the salmon that ate the algae. DHA, they call it the human consciousness chemical. Scientists don't quite understand how it works, but they say that is the chemical that helps you have human consciousness. And so when developing brains and developed brains are deficient in DHA and B12, which animal products are the most readily bioavailable source of those things, you become not a clear thinker. You don't have critical thought anymore when you don't have those things. And I don't want to sound like Alex Jones and being a conspiracy theorist, but there's a reason why the elites don't want you in peak physical shape with your brain running on all cylinders. There's a reason for that.
Amazing. And you mentioned bugs, Sheila, and I understand I believe in London, Ontario, there's a facility that's opening up that's going to be processing crickets for human consumption.
Human consumption. Yeah.
Well, yeah, not to go fishing with, not to feed your turtle with, but will those critters have a warning affixed to them too? Or is it, it looks like, according to the CBC, Aspire Farms processes crickets into all natural, sustainable superfood ingredients. Oh boy, does that look delicious. I came into the office today starving. I skipped breakfast, Sheila. I think I just lost my appetite.
Beef gets a warning label. Hard drugs get decriminalized in BC, and they want us to eat crickets. Tell me I'm not wrong when I say we are the Great Reset Nation.
You know what? I got to go down there. I got to get a cricket burger.
I told you got to go down there. I want you to get a tour of the facility.
No,
dress as a cricket. Dress as a lizard. No, don't.
Oh boy, you're bringing back Transcat memories now. But
I'm
seriously,
breaking my own rule about no costumes for David Menzies.
I'll take one for the team. Maybe I'll have to bring a blindfold with me. But how is it served, Sheila? Like, is it a cricket burger or is it like cricket soup? Or, in which case, so much for the saying, waiter, there's a fly in my soup. It's, it's one of the essential ingredients, actually. But
we charge extra for the fly.
Yeah, that's right. Where do you think you're getting your protein from, bub? And
I think they got a big taxpayer, like a big, huge subsidy that company did.
Oh, well, knocks
Naturally.
me down with a feather. I have to tell you, I'm asking these questions, Sheila, because I remember back in the late 70s, and my goodness, I got a lot of news coverage, and people were going, oh, are you kidding me? But the Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto, they had an exhibit, and it was about cooking with insects. And I'll never forget, one of the entrees was bumblebee raisin bread, and the idea was that this makes it more palatable.
My skin's crawling.
Pardon me?
My skin just did like a full body crawl.
Well, but the reason for it, Sheila, was that when you ground up the bumblebees and the raisins, they're indistinguishable. They all look like the same. You don't know if it's all bees, all raisins, a blend of both. So that was their way of sort of making it more palatable for people that don't look upon a little bug with 6 legs and fly and wings.
Do you know what? Humans look upon bugs with revulsion, and that's an evolutionary cue. We should listen to it. You know, there's a reason why we see bugs outside, earthworms, and my stomach gets upset. People see bugs and they're scared of them. They see spiders and they freak out. We should listen to that. We shouldn't be putting them in our mouths to eat.
You know what, Sheila? You're so right. Did we not learn anything from the 1986 David Cronenberg film, The Fly? Bugs are bad news. Although I did like the speech. It's very profound in the film, but I did like the idea when he's warning his girlfriend away that there are no insect politicians, right? It's eat or be eaten. But that aside, when we monkey around with the insect community, only bad things can follow, I think. But who knows? By the way, Sheila, I'm looking at the clock on the wall. It's been time has been flying, if you catch the pun there. A little Barry Horowitz.
Oh, good job. You're going to throw your arm out, patting yourself on the back there. Before we move on, I know we want to get to this, but I just want to note that Justin Trudeau is causing airport hell. Maybe not today.
Yes. Tell that story. This is good.
I couldn't figure out why it happened until this morning, till I got the press release in my email inbox. So my daughter is set to fly out of the country. Well, she should have been at the airport right now. So anyway, last night at about 6 o'clock-ish, I didn't even check my email because she had already been checked in for her flight hours earlier. And she was at rugby practice and all of her friends say, "Oh my goodness, our flight got canceled." And so she comes to the car and she's really upset. I'm frozen again. Anyway, she comes to the car and she's really upset because all of her am I still frozen?
No.
Okay, great. Okay. So anyway, she's at rugby practice last night. She's going on a rugby tour of Europe. And she comes to the car. She's really upset. And she said, "My friends just got all got an email, said our flight's been canceled." And so I checked my email. Lo and behold, her flight has been canceled. No reason for it to be canceled. It was a full flight, by the way. It was very difficult to get her on that flight with some other girls from her team. So I'm like, why on earth? WestJet rebooks them for Wednesday, which puts them in Dublin a day behind. They've already paid for hotels for the first night. So big inconvenience. They're missing training, everything. But then I get an email in my inbox this morning. The reason they need Pearson cleared out and looking not like the Baghdad airport on the day the Americans withdrew is because Justin Trudeau and the gang are down there today, or at least the Liberals are down there today for 2 hours talking about all the things that they're doing to make the airport work more efficiently again. So, but tomorrow, with all the rebooked flights that were canceled from today so that the Liberals could have the empty airport for the TV cameras, it's going to be absolute mayhem tomorrow in the Pearson airport. I don't know. I mean, like, I think my daughter's got a 45-minute connection from...
Forget it. She's done for. There's no way she'll make that connection.
She's got to go from now to, instead of a straight flight from Edmonton to Toronto to Dublin, she goes Edmonton to Winnipeg, laid over, Winnipeg to Toronto, short connection. She's going to miss the flight, which means that she's going to be 2 days back from her training in Dublin and might even miss a game.
And this affects hundreds and hundreds of other travelers. It's not just a Sheila thing, but are you listening to Sheila, folks? This is all being done for a photo op. This is so that there is not the typical carnage and chaos at Pearson Airport, so that Justin Trudeau doesn't have to, put up with throngs of the great unwashed masses. This is all about optics, as per usual with this government, and look what's happening. And as Sheila said, it's going to just intensify an already hideously ugly situation at Pearson International Airport. I hope you're going to do a monologue or something about this, Sheila, because this has to be outed. I mean, maybe you'll have to wait until your daughter goes through the process
Back.
tomorrow to see how bad it gets. But you got to wonder too. I mean, the timing of this. Do you think that Justin Trudeau is got your computer or your cell phone under surveillance? Kind of like Rob Stocky, the former cop that took part in the Freedom Convoy protest, who found out a few weeks ago that he had his electronic devices surveyed by law enforcement, even though he has no criminal record. He himself is a law enforcement personnel, but he's kind of, I don't know, hanging with the wrong crowd, according to Trudeau Liberals. It makes you wonder, Sheila. I know that sounds crazy,
for
but
sure.
The timing is so suspect,
Apologies to my daughter's rugby team because I inconvenienced then a bunch of people on the team. But and it happened, like I tried to call WestJet and I was on hold for like an hour and 20 minutes. I got hung up on 3 times because they're dealing with all these flights. Like I'll when she's in the air, I'll deal with like, hey, this seems a little bit ridiculous. You're canceling our flight 17 hours before she gets on it. And you're just like, no big deal. We'll just book you the next day. No, actually we had things planned out in Dublin for her when she got there and people picking her up from the airport. She's a 16-year-old girl flying across the Atlantic on her own. Anyways, media are invited to Toronto Pearson on June 21st as the Greater Toronto Airports Authority and its partners host a media day ahead of a very busy summer travel season. Canadian Air Transport Security Authority and Canadian Border Services Agency will be made available to provide tips and advice to travelers for the summer season.
Tips and advice.
In addition
How about
to
this?
interviews.
Get here 6 hours early. There's your first tip.
And I think actually if I had booked her on a flight tomorrow when I was originally booking her flight, I think I probably could have saved $400. But I remember her saying, no, I have to be there on this day.
Unbelievable.
So we just ate the cost and now they just rebook us on that flight anyway. And I guess all's fair. In addition to interviews, media will be invited to view measures in place to help passengers navigate the security screening process, including new video screens and divest tables to get rid of liquids, aerosols, and gels ahead of security. So this is why they dumped a series of flights to make sure that Pearson wasn't a zoo when all these people got there.
But Sheila, we've been doing this for decades now. Certainly since post 9/11, right? Not bringing liquids of a certain volume. I mean, that's de rigueur. That's nothing new. That's nothing, any kind of post-COVID kind of protocol. 'Twas ever thus. And I heard one of those airport spokesmen on the radio today, and this is supposedly going to clear up the log jams. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Don't wear belts with like fake bullets in it. Evidently, they manufacture belts like that. Okay. Oh, and there's a brand of perfume or cologne. It is packaged in a grenade, and because it's liquid in there, it gives it a certain weight and density. That could hold up the luggage screening too. Are you kidding me? Having things that look like bullets and grenades. That's the reason why we're going through this misery? Give me a break.
Well, and everybody just say a prayer for the airport workers for tomorrow. Because all those flights that were supposed to be in the airport today, they've all been rebooked for tomorrow, and it is going to be absolute mayhem. It's just going to be a disaster. And so the airport was made worse to show everybody how much better the Liberals have made it.
And on that note, Sheila, Trudeau and his henchmen, they're not going through those lines. Oh, are you kidding? They have a private jet. They're whisked right to the door. All that.
Oh, David, it's better than that.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to wrap it up. But I was going through an order paper response and I was adding it all up by hand. And it was about Justin Trudeau's jet fuel.
Oh, yes.
That he uses in the Challenger. And my number is 76.5 million liters. And actually his travel time went up during the pandemic, not down. So I don't know. They tell me there's a climate emergency.
Yeah.
They tell me there's a public health emergency. We all have to stay home to stay safe or we're going to kill our grandparents. And Justin Trudeau's just flying around all over the place.
It's different. He's special, you know, and the
He
media
buy
will
carbon offsets. It's fine.
Yeah, and the media will ask tough questions of that, like, what shampoo do you use, Justin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, clown
Tom
world.
Clark. Tom Clark.
we should get to our super chat, Sheila.
Yes. Okay, we've got one from Annalisa, 1964. She gives us $20. Holy cow, Annalisa.
Nice, thank you
so much. Putting in my Rumble pre-show. Sheila, can you please tell my sweet Menzies that he looks super duper hot today? Thanks. Love you, Sheila.
It must be the Humidex. I think it's going up to 46 in Toronto today.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We're in for a lot of hot, humid weather after, I think, Sheila, has been one of the coldest, windiest springs I've ever experienced in the Greater Toronto area. It's been brutal. But today is the first day of summer, and it's living up to the billing.
It's 16 here right now.
Oh,
16. 16 degrees.
Celsius or Fahrenheit?
It's just too cold. Paul Otto Newman gives us $5. I'm all for popularizing the idea of calling Mendocino as cowardly lion.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
This is nice.
Cowardly lion.
I've just been calling him misinformation Mendocino. Fraser McBurney gives us $5. Heroes. Where have all our heroes gone? Like the Lone Ranger, Zorro. Well, those aren't real. Johnny Yuma, Roy Rogers, Paladin, Robin Hood, the Cisco Kid, and even Johnny Jellybean. They have all gone YouTube, so enjoy.
Well, you know, in the case of the Lone Ranger, the original TV Lone Ranger, Sheila, I remember after the gig was up, he continued to go around in public as the Lone Ranger, so much so that the studio had to get a restraining order. And instead of a mask, he would wear sunglasses. He was still trying to be the Lone Ranger. So he's kind of real.
Fraser gives us $5 and says, you can kill a pregnant woman and you'll be charged with a double homicide. I don't know if it's double homicide, but there's a law. I forget the name of the law in Canada. It's recently introduced where you will receive like a sentencing add-on if you kill a pregnant woman and her child dies, or you harm a pregnant woman and her child dies as a result. But a woman can kill a child in her womb and she celebrated the world has gone mad. I'll raise you one more crazy thing. So the NDP in Alberta, they wanted a day of bereavement for pregnancy loss. They wanted this like to be a law. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yep. And then they add in there pregnancy loss through any means. I'm like, oh, so if you are equating the woman who lost a child to the woman who terminated a pregnancy, you want that person to get bereavement off, and you can't even put together that their own argument to get bereavement leave for purposeful termination of pregnancy acknowledges the fact that that's a child.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah. AMT 60 $1. I wish Canada had Second Amendment rights like the U.S. People with guns should be able to defend themselves like in the U.S. If other Canadians can't defend themselves, then JT's RCMP detail shouldn't carry. Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that Justin Trudeau has armed guards is an acknowledgement that good guys with guns beat bad guys all the time. It's just that he wants to outsource his safety to somebody else, and I don't have that privilege.
Well, forget Second Amendment rights. We don't even have private property rights in Canada, Sheila. That's
First
not
Amendment rights.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Everything we have is subject to reasonable limits, and who gets to decide what reasonable is?
Yeah.
Some liberal appointed judge somewhere. AMT 60 gives us $1. They want us to eat bugs, and now the cricket plant is open. David, you do the zaniest stuff like entering the women's dancing competition. Are you going to try the crickets?
Yeah, I will try a cricket. I will. I mean, I'm going to do some research. I mean, like, what condiment do you put on a cricket? Natasha here at the office gave me a wonderful present last month, sugar-free ketchup that has to remain refrigerated at all times or it goes bad. And maybe that's how I'll christen that bottle of sugar-free ketchup, put it on the cricket so that I taste more sugar-free ketchup than cricket. And I don't even know what the sugar-free ketchup tastes like, but I'm betting it tastes better than a bug.
People have to listen to their bodies here. When a bug flies in your mouth, you automatically gag, right? Like you gag, you retch. Listen to your bodies. That's your body telling you not to eat the bugs. So don't eat the bugs.
You must be psychic. A bug flew into my mouth while I was cycling yesterday.
Close your mouth.
I'm trying to breathe. Say, maybe I should be masking up after all. Maybe there is a reason for those face diapers.
Just close your mouth. Don't be outside with your mouth open like a Hoover. Alberta Don gives us $3. Every person is born with the right to defend themselves and their family. Experts say you have about 6 seconds to either call the police or get to a firearm in a home invasion. I remember this. I forget who. Ian Bailey, was that who it was? The police tried to say that he had unlawfully stored his firearms because he could get to his gun safe and get it open and get his firearm, and he did. And he dealt with some people, I think, who were trying to burn down his house with his and his dogs. And he was able to get to his gun and fire his weapon. And they tried to say that there was no possible way that he could have done it that fast. And he did.
That was the focus of their investigation.
Yeah.
The victim defending himself.
Yeah.
And these cops are playing beat the clock.
Yeah.
And that's unbelievable.
Well, in Alberta, there was that farmer who was home alone with his baby daughter. And these losers came onto his property to rob him. So he winged one of them, shot him in the arm. He was sued. First he was charged. Then he was sued by the guy that he shot.
That's gross.
Yeah. Well, eventually they changed the law here. Jason Kenney, in one of his rare acts of defending the citizen, changed the law so that if you're hurt committing a crime against somebody else in their property, you can't sue them. But just the gall of these people. Imagine finding the lawyer to take that case.
Oh, I'm sure there's one out there.
Ambulance chasers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're all caught up now.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Sheila. And also a thank you to Olivia and Efren and Danny behind the boards there. And thanks to everybody in our audience who tuned in. And a super special thanks for those of you who contributed a buck or $3. It's how we keep the lights on here. There'll be 2 other Rebels here on Wednesday. I think maybe is it Lewis and High Energy Andrew says Chapados. And in the meantime, folks, Sheila and I will be back on Thursday. And as always, stay sane.
The Canadian position on Keystone is unchanged. It's something we bring up whenever we have these meetings, and I did today. But I also really want to emphasize something Secretary Yellen emphasized in her opening remarks, which is actually the energy crisis which Putin's invasion of Ukraine has prompted is yet another reason to take climate action really, really seriously. We need to do this for the planet and to preserve a livable planet for our children and grandchildren. But we also need to take climate action because it is part of a geopolitically safer and more secure world. And